Welcome to The Collective, where every conversation ignites a new perspective. Join us as we delve into the journeys of remarkable individuals, explore the art of growth, resilience, and the power of a shared mission as we strive to be better together. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned today. We got Pat coming in here, we got Isaac returning after a little while, Shaun, myself, we are ready for a conversation and I'm loving it. Now, while I am loving it, you should be too. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all the good stuff, get your emails when we go live, which is of course Fridays for The Collective and Wednesdays for The Gold Mine. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, put them up in the comment section. We can hit those throughout. And then if you have not yet, make sure you are signed up for the Reinforcement Loop. That is our weekly newsletter that goes out and gives you all kinds of tidbits of what we talked about during the week, as well as some brain candy to chew on over the weekend. Other than that, let's get right into it. Isaac, quick, a little 10 to 15 seconds. Where are you working from all that good stuff? It's been a while. Hit us up.
Yeah. It's been good. Excited to be on here. Thank you guys for having me on. My name is Isaac Miller. I live in Kansas City, Missouri, and I am a father, husband, Marine Corps veteran, and currently just started a new tech company that really is AI focused on enterprise and businesses.
Bam. I love it. Pat, how you doing, man? It's been a little while.
I'm doing good, bro. I'm Pat Miller, 20-year Canadian veteran, infantry, special operations, mainly special boat teams type stuff. Retired, went into the film industry, armourer, and military advisor, and then also trying to be a professional photographer, which I'm somewhat succeeding at.
Nice. Shaun, how's the mountains?
Things are good. Spent about 4 hours on the Roslyn Main Street there yesterday afternoon, hanging out with another guy from 3VP, Patricia's hoo-wah. And that was unexpected. Funny story, this is how it came to be. Can't even make this up, to be honest. I'm in my office, I'm doing my thing, and I get a text from Doreen, my wife, and she says, hey, because one day a week, she works at a kitchen store in town to kind of like be in the community and kind of, like be part of the action kind of thing. Doesn't really need to be, but I just decided that she wants to be in town for one day a week to say hi to everyone. And so she sends me a text and it's, hey, there's another veteran in here. He recognizes me from your Instagram account and he's wondering what you're doing. Like he knew her from my account. And so the coincidence of him walking into a kitchen store on the one day a week that she's there and then recognizing her, and then 20 minutes later, him and I were hanging out on the Roslyn sidewalk for 4 hours. And if not for my Instagram account, that never would have happened. And so, like, I know we're going to be talking about things that are technology related. And I mean, obviously, I'm curious as to what Isaac's got on the go. I mean, we're all in the game of technology to some degree. But man, sometimes I get a bit down on social media. But if not for social media, that just wouldn't have happened. And so, yay, social media.
Instagram for the win. That doesn't happen very often, so I think they'll probably like it. Well, we are going to be talking tech stuff. We're going to be talking all kinds of different things, but I really want to get into just the general idea, imitation to innovation. Where's the line between mimicry versus copying versus faking versus that kind of stuff? And we kind of discussed it right before the show, and I want to get your guys' first thoughts. So, Isaac, I'm going to hit you first. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think this topic's awesome just from even a philosophical level. Imitation to innovation, and I mean, even as a child, we don't really innovate per se. We're taking in everything around us and imitating what we see, and over time we make it our own. We develop our own personality, we develop our own skills and abilities, but it all kind of starts with information we get around us. And then over time, innovation flows from that. So I'm interested to see everyone's kind of takes on this, because I don't think true novel innovation is something that happens as frequently as we think it does, if we really trace it back to its roots. So I'm excited to see what everyone says.
I dig it. Pat, what do you got?
That'll be interesting when you just look at it from like again from the philosophical kind of point of view, and you're kind of thinking about like as an individual, like if I relate it to myself, like there's so many things that I've imitated before I actually kind of became it, and then was able to push it further. We could take even like the teams, as an example, right? Like I was a cadet, and then I wanted to be an infantry soldier, and then and I wanted to be in special operations. Then I got special operations. I really loved the boat stuff, and then when I wanted to actually push the envelope in the boat stuff, so then I was able to innovate. So it was kind of a longer timeline in that particular scenario, but it still went from imitation to innovation.
It kind of, when you started talking about the teams, it reminded me of teaching recruits using the EDI method, right? Explain, demonstrate, imitate, where you are actively trying to get someone to mimic you to the point that they can do it right. Shaun, any thoughts?
Yeah, I've already got several. Just based on what you just said, Chance, what is fascinating about EDI, explanation, demonstration, imitation, is that when I was there was a period of time there in the military where no one really knew whether are we going to use EDI? Are we going to use IED? Are we going to whatever. All the acronyms were being flipped around, and no one was really like categorizing what's the only way we can teach. We were trying a bunch of different things, and every single time that we would try something different to teach in a different fashion, and I'm talking about in the regular infantry, we'd always run up against it's EDI. That's it, that's all. And it will never change. But then a week and a half later, it would change to something else. We're trying something different, and now it's official. So, like, I went through a phase there in my infantry career where I saw a few different ways of teaching. And you know what really sucked about all of that is I can look back on that right now and just look at a system that was one-dimensional because someone had just arbitrarily decided this is the only way to teach. Whereas I know now, looking back at everyone that I've worked with, everyone learns differently. There is no one way to teach. There is no EDI that works for everyone. There isn't. There's EDI that works for a bunch of people, but then what about the outliers that it doesn't work for, or the other 37% that it isn't really jiving with? And so EDI is a fascinating little topic that is indicative of why, for some people, imitation can lead to innovation, and why for a lot of other people, it may not, because institutionally they were never taught to maybe innovate.
Interesting. I'm going to come back around. Isaac, what are you thinking?
I mean, that's a really good point. The way we teach, honestly, it doesn't at times spark innovation at all. And looking at just the education system here in the US, and I'm not sure if it's similar in Canada, but they kind of shun innovation. Essentially, like they want you to follow the rules. They want you to do exactly the formulas that they teach you, and don't go outside of those limits. And even in college, I find that being true as well. It's not until like you get into like more grad school where you're actually doing stuff that might bring up new inventions and new discoveries that you actually get to start thinking outside of the box. But typically the people that make it to that point or do those types of innovations are the ones that were really bad at school and were told that they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And the weird kind of like, you're not supposed to think that way, but they're the ones that actually do end up innovating because they understand that like this is just a system of imitation from the beginning.
Pat, coming to you. What do you got?
Yeah, this is all good. It's like I'm trying to formulate a good thought here. I don't think I have much to add at this point, because it's like at this point of the conversation, like we're talking like the individual, like how does an individual, me, I, you know imitate and then innovate, you know what I mean? And then we're also looking at how the institutions can kind of replicate that as well, right? So it's almost like we're in these two broad circles that are trying to overlap each other. Because like I know who like I am, the type of like IQ and kind of way I learn. I'm always trying to look. I'll say that I'm like the most efficient lazy man in a sense, because I'll look at a system and I'll be like, whatever it is, it could be a weapons drill, it could be a way of doing nav, it could be anything. And I'll be like, why do we have all this dogma in between steps? Why are we not just doing, A through C, when you get comfortable with a certain subject? And so then and then you have to like convince the institution, like, no, we need to teach it this way because we don't need the, steps 3, 4, and 5. Those need to be erased because they're actually causing dogma and they're being held around for no apparent reason. And, having that freedom to innovate, that freedom to, make that happen, it's weird because you have the individual and then you have the institution, and the institution could be completely against it. Like you take the regular army, they'll be like, nope, we're not, nope. Steps 3, 4, and 5 stay. And you're like, okay, fine.
The regular army does like to do that a lot. I'm just like, nope, we're doing it this way. You don't get to talk about it. Now. So let me ask you this then, because to Isaac's point, I think imitation that's how we learn. When you think about childhood, when you think about growing up, when you think about parenting, right? Your kids are going to do the things that you do. But there's still a line between originality, and I say this because if I were to take, let's say, a recruit and teach him the very basics of weapons handling, eventually, with time, without anything beyond basic handling, with some curiosity and some and like I said, time, they would come up with new ways to do things that we would never think of. And I'm wondering where, like, can you gain novel thought with a modicum of information, or do you kind of have to have almost a blank slate to come up with novel information? Shaun, I'm going to come to you on this one first. What do you think?
Sure thing. So it is a good question, and the way you've laid it out is interesting. And I got to go back about maybe 7 or so minutes to something that Isaac said, and it was regarding novel thought. And there's actually not a ton of it occurring on the regular. Like, definitely novel thought isn't as common thought. And so, but fascinatingly enough, one of the reasons that this podcast was started was to create novel wisdom. And I'm not talking about having an opportunity, or Chance having an opportunity to like just do these freaking monstrously long monologues where we espouse all of our wisdom that we've gathered throughout our lives. Far from it. What we do try to do, or what I have tried to do in the podcast since the get-go, since we started having guests, and with the newsletter, and with the e-zine, is to take novel wisdom from that guest and combine it with the other guest's novel wisdom and create like frickin' real-time new wisdom. That's what I try to do in a podcast. I try to take great ideas from the guests, or me, or Chance, or whoever is in the conversation, and I try to put them together in ways that I feel I've never heard before. I've never heard anyone think like that before. And it doesn't mean that I have to think way different than the rest of the human species. It just means that I've got to probe enough, or question enough, or connect enough dots for us all that someone in the group will solve the puzzle that I don't even know how to work on. So I think truly that we are all responsible to try to create, or at least seek, novel wisdom. And if only to seek it, then maybe we will maybe make it visible to someone else that is near us, in our proximity. And so if we never do anything with the novel wisdom, perhaps by shedding light on it for others, they can do something with it.
Pat, what are you thinking?
Yeah, no. So like, one of the things that I kind of like brewing around in my head is like, as we talk about this, like, like we don't have, like, in our today's age, we don't have a lot of like new thoughts. You know what I mean? Like, it's normally a collective. Yeah, pun there, but it's a collective of multiple ideas, people, innovations, things that have already kind of exist or are happening, in which somebody else is looking at a different way that, and so I'm having a hard time articulating this, because like not only like there isn't a lot of new thought, it's actually like a collection of different thoughts. Like you can't really make a song anymore without having elements of another song these days, right? Because there's so many freaking songs. It's not like we're back in the caveman days and we're just like, oh, we just discovered this round thing, we're going to call it a wheel. It's like, no, the wheel already exists. How can we make the wheel better? And then on top of that, you have to have individuals who are curious enough and have a playful enough imagination that are, seeking this information and bringing it in and then kind of rearranging it in their heads, and then hopefully find other domesticated primates that they can like kind of like do this whole thing together and come up with these cool new things.
There was you reminded me of this. There's a commercial from, I think it was the late 90s. It might have been the early 2000s when the World Cup was coming in, and they put out a new ball for the World Cup. And the whole point of the commercials that were coming out was the fact that the ball was actually technically rounder than the previous balls had been, right? And when you said, we made this wheel, I was like, oh yeah, that's great. But it reminded me of like, how do we upgrade a wheel? You take a wheel, well, okay, well, you make the outside rounder. And then you start to go, well, how do we make that better? And then people start asking, better for what? Do we want better for the mountains? Better for the rivers? What do we do? What do you got?
This is a good question. And your soccer ball is actually a good example, because I remember when that occurred. And when when they were talking about like it's even rounder now, all I thought was the only thing that's rounder is their bank account with all of the zeros that they just added to it as they sell more round balls. And so the interesting thing about novel wisdom or novel ideas or novel marketing or brand new vectors that society has never seen is it's quite exploitative initially. Like, I mean, what you do with that novelty, what you do with that sort of new to the table, as it were, like you can exploit with that. And you can exploit for the good, and you can exploit for the dark side. And so, like, I'm not suggesting that because someone has like a rounder idea that they are now Darth Vader. I'm just saying that like it's got to be exploited. If you don't exploit novel wisdom or novelty, then it never existed. You can't have a beautiful mind with a beautiful idea and then hang on to it until you die. That's not novelty. That's just rumination insanity. And so like if you ain't putting it out there, if your beautiful idea ain't like skidding across the dirt right now to see how it fares, that ain't novelty, man. That's really just rumination insanity. So to put it out there, I think, is actually the novel part of our modern society right now. It's not whether someone has got like a cool idea in their head that's bouncing around. The real novelty nowadays is like having the guts to like ride the freak train and see where it goes.
Novelty is action then. Ooh, I like that. Isaac, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. But I am going to push into it a little bit. Whereas I would say that most of the exploitation within innovation happens from an advancement of imitation. So like the ball being more round, they just recreated the ball. Like it wasn't like a whole new ball or a whole new sport. It was the same ball, just more round, right? We look at all of the different, AI innovations right now, but they're all just wrappers of AI stuff that they already have. If we look at movies and cinema right now, they're just recreations of things that we've already done in the past. If we, look at society as a whole, our innovations are typically just recreations of things that have already happened just to make more money. Because they see, oh, there's supply and demand. There's a demand here. We can recreate that thing in our own image to bring that demand to us. And so we see a lot of like the negative exploitation through imitation, because the true innovation is such a delayed gratification time span. It takes a long time to truly innovate something. And people don't want to wait that long to see any kind of like financial return. And so they just see where's the demand in the marketplace right now. How can we make that our own way and either mimic or change a little thing or even steal it and sell it as our own.
I got this really neat image of what you're saying here is that like true innovation is more of a strategic level vision, right? In order to see movement on the battlefield at a strategic level, it's got to be it's a big movement. There's a lot of innovation, but in order to
it can be.
Okay. Break it down.
It could be 50-50. Like 10% of that could be strategic or non, like a lot of my life. As I said to the guy that I was hanging out with yesterday, bro, I don't even know what I'm doing tomorrow. And I'll probably screw it up, but I'll try real hard. And so that's the way it is, man. Like I don't have this Gantt chart on my wall right now as to how podcasting is going to look 10 years from now. I just don't. I don't even have tomorrow laid down. I've got a guy called Chance Burles who keeps me in check. And so like that in its own way is a form of innovation for me, because like I didn't have a wingman for quite a while. And so your innovation to me, your novel ideas, how you string the program together, the podcast as it were, all the stuff that you do, Chance, is novelty to me to some degree. Now, could I do it myself? Could I create all of that stuff? Maybe, but maybe not. But that isn't the conversation today. It's not about what we could or couldn't do or will or won't do. It's about, creating something that is innovative. And I feel like if we talk about podcasting, like there's a billion out there, billion podcasts, 1 trillion podcast. There's podcasts on Mars. And so what differentiates us? Well, that has literally already been said. At its core, one of the central pillars is to create novel wisdom with novel thinkers. And that isn't really the mantra for a lot of podcasts out there right now. The mantra typically is it's a reporting style or an interviewing style, or it's a, trying to make a point style that is oftentimes agenda based. But literally, as we were in the green room, I think we all generally said, I gave this almost no thought because I'm curious as to where it goes, where the podcast goes. And so I think that to some degree, our podcast is a bit innovative, not like earth-shatteringly innovative, but it's different enough that I feel like as we speak about novel, we're being novel within the shell that we've created.
This is an interesting point, and I'm makes me think about a few different things. But I want to jump into one of my questions here because it's been eating at me, and I want to get your guys' opinions on it. And it's, if all knowledge is built on what we came before, as we were talking about earlier, can anything ever be original? Is there novel thought to begin with? Or is it just a rehashment of everything we've done before? And we kind of danced around the idea, but I don't think we really answered the question. So, Pat, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think?
It's super interesting because we're looking at a long timeline for us humans and where we are right now currently. I don't think there is a lot of like completely original um, thought. There still is, and there still is a lot of it. And those people are the people that come up with some of that stuff are obviously on a different level than most, right? Because whatever they invent or create, we'll say AI, for example, AI as we know, like chat GTP now, right? Kind of thing. Um, the guy that kind of like brought that forward and then everybody that built onto it, creating to what it is now, I mean, that was all innovation, right? But not necessarily was it the original thought. And so, because as we talked about this for we were only 30 minutes into this conversation, I'm kind of thinking about it and I'm kind of like, well, it doesn't matter if it's not like a pure original thought. Like hey, how can I, create a replication of the scene in front of me? Oh, a photograph, and then we're starting with like, nickel based, chemicals to like, create a camera. Um, no, but we're innovating. We keep pushing it better and better and better and better and better. And we can talk about where that goes, but like I even like think to myself about like suspension in a car, right? Before there was no suspension, then there was like a spring. Then we should add a shock absorber so that like we can slow that suspension down, so you're not bouncing down the road 6 minutes after you hit the bump. And now we're at like fully computerized systems. If you look at like Baja 1000, you look at those trophy trucks, they've gone from like spring and like this like super crazy gas system to controlling it with a computer, and you just see the telemetry of the lap times get better and better and better. So the innovation of slapping a computer onto that suspension system has been monumental in the motorsports industry. So I love that we're building on things, and like original thought, I don't think we have to pressure ourselves on original thought to feel innovative or even be innovative.
Isaac, what are you thinking?
100%. Something that really came to my mind is like innovation is within the nuance. Looking at the suspension system, right? Like, how can we make this better for like motorsports, for example? And it's like there's the nuance there. We don't have to necessarily recreate what it means to have a suspension system. What we can do is we can find the nuances that we can bring in new ideas or new technologies or even existing technologies that no one has ever thought about just collaborating within those two things. So bringing like a computer system into the suspension system, and like those are two standalone systems, and they realize, wait, we can use one to benefit the other. And the idea of merging them is innovation. And it's not like they created a whole, like they didn't create the computer, they didn't create the suspension system, but they did figure out a novel way to merge. And so I think a lot of the innovation is not necessarily in original thought. It's in how can we take lines of thinking or in computer system lines of code that might be standalone and figure out a way that they fit together to create something new.
Blending. I got a question on this, but I want to hear Shaun's thoughts on it before I jump on the question.
So a couple of things. One is coincidentally, just yesterday, I was on my Instagram feed, a little clip popped up, and it was Toyota. And it was several Toyota vehicles. Started off, I believe it was with the Toyota Tacoma. And it showed a scene on a highway. And on the highway, it looked like there was maybe 50, 60 kind of these portable rubber speed bumps. And they looked to be about that tall, and they were the entire length of the road. And the vehicles, each of the vehicles were ripping down the highway. I think it said it was 120 kilometers per hour. And hits the first bump, and then wham, rips across this area. And you think it's like off into the ditch, over the guardrail. You just don't know what's going to happen. And the Tacoma just glides over this thing. You're like, whoa, that was pretty impressive. Next truck. And now I'm getting bored. I'm like, what's the freaking point? Big deal. Now every truck in the world goes across speed bumps like magic. And so here comes the Prius. And the Prius hits the first bump and basically implodes into about a bajillion pieces. And then the next one and the next one. So you see like 3 or 4 vehicles that aren't built to deal with the circumstance in front of them. And so they're in a billion parts. And so like if you didn't watch the entire video or the entire Instagram clip, you'd be none the wiser. You wouldn't see any novel solution there. The entire thing would be a boring clip because you hadn't seen good and bad or the two extremes. And if we're talking about suspension right now, that's really what we're describing is the pursuit of extremes, extreme performance, the extreme edges of the left and right, the good and bad. And so the progression of modern suspension systems has a trickle-down effect out of the Baja into the highway. And so that is literally what mankind does, is we pursue the extreme edges of performance, of innovation, of science, of technology. We push up against the fiery edge so hard that we're burning our hand, and we will continue to burn our hand until we see the thing that we want to see. And then whether we take that thing or our neighbor takes that thing and turns it into something else, that's neither here nor there, because that's what we do. And then how do we do it? Well, I mean, I used to be a computer system engineer. I know how it's done. You have to be a systems thinker. If you can think systematically, if you can connect systems together, just as Isaac described, the computer and the suspension, and then some guy comes in with gas cartridges and another guy comes in with servos, and here we go. Now you've got like a bunch of people in a room, and all you need is one system thinker to make it all come together. But if everyone in that room is a system thinker, holy croncamole, prepare for a brand new form of suspension that's just once again pushed the edge of the extreme. So what's it all about? Well, I think that if we're talking about imitation to innovation, we should also talk about the kind of people that make those things happen.
Now, the type of people, I love this concept of getting into systems thinking, and I want to define something just quickly before we get too deep into that. I want to know where you guys see the line between copying well and actual innovation, because to you guys' point with suspension systems, and even to your point, Shaun, with the video, my Nissan Titan outside is almost on par with the Tacoma, which is almost on par with the Ford F-150, which is almost on par with, like, standard trucks nowadays are pretty standard. There's not a lot that separates them until you get into the extremes of performance. And even then, at the performance level, most of those things aren't separated by much, and they're pretty similar. You look at NASCAR or Indy or whatever, each of them in their own little nuance are almost the same. You know what I mean?
So you say that, and I agree. For the common man, they're all the same. The only thing that's different between all of the trucks in the world is the color. Now, if you have more of a critical eye, or perhaps if you are a performer or you need a tool that performs beyond your ability, now you're paying attention to the milliseconds. Now you're paying attention to the thickness of the brake rotor. Now you're paying attention to the heat transfer in the brake lines. That's what performers do. Because if they don't pay attention to the critical details, then they die a fiery death. And so you can't be in a vehicle that's built to go 1,000,000 miles an hour and basically schlump your way into it without an idea about the technology at hand. But you can schlump your way into your F-150 and not know anything about that truck and still get to work. So the common man doesn't need to know the performance differences, but the performer does.
So then would you say, and I'm going to come to Pat and Isaac on this one as well, would you say that the line between copying well and creating something new in these situations is your own level of nuance? Say that's accurate?
I would say it's two different things. We're two different subjects because, like, Pat, as an example, can probably take a disposable camera and grab a better photo than someone who just bought their first Leica, based on they've never taken digital photography before, perhaps. And so, like, the tool is not as important as the man, but the tool becomes important when the right man needs the right tool. And so you can take a slingshot and hand it to an infantryman, and he's going to take care of business on the battlefield far better than someone who flips fries at McDonald's. But conversely, that slingshot ain't putting out French fries. So the right thing at the right time in the right hands is what we're talking about. And if we're talking about innovation, then we have to talk about the extremes of the right things. And if we're talking automotive, then we're talking F1. And if we're talking F1, we're now talking splitting milliseconds, not just seconds. And if we're talking about that, then for sure, you can grab any driver in that pit and ask them if performance matters to the millisecond. And they'll tell you, yeah. So,
yeah, good point. And I do like the concept of the extremes, because one of the most extreme experiences we can have is war. And we do that all the time. That's where most of the innovation comes from, which is pretty amazing as well. Pat, what are you thinking?
Dude, I'm just like waiting. I'm chomping at the bit to get back on the mic on this one, because it's like one of the biggest things that we are not really, and it's almost like we have to take a right turn and talk about for a minute, is what a lot of times drives innovation. Like, we're living in a world where we're trying to shut down a lot of things that would drive innovation. I mean, war is one huge one. That is a big one, and I think everybody wants world peace. So I'm not talking about like we need more war. But when I talk about like even things like competition, you know, again, like we talk about F1. If F1 didn't exist, there wouldn't be this trickle down effect. If there wasn't the idea of pushing fighter jets further and harder, we wouldn't have some of the innovations we have in commercial aviation. If we weren't like, you know, it wasn't the Baja 1000 didn't exist. Shoe technology, you know, for athletes, you know, everything is driven by this human need to compete and to push forward. And if we don't have these events and we don't have these avenues or arenas to do that, or societally we're freaking told that like we don't need to be you know, competitive and we're all going to get participation medals, well, what's the point of making the next best shoe or the next best tire or the next best suspension system? Like Renault in the 80s had, you know, the suspension system in F1 that could, you know, based on the track, could predict, you know, where to put the dampeners and where to put the pressure, right? And then again, and then the other small thing that we have to add into this is the whole human factor of the whole thing. You know, yeah, everybody in the pits will agree that it comes down to milliseconds, but there's only one driver. All those drivers on that track, almost all their technologies and their innovations are within, you know, literally small, minute increments of one another. What puts the person on the podium is the psychology and the brain and the innovation that they're putting forward in their own self. So like there's like, you know, as we unpack this, you know, there's like so many more elements than just like, hey, I got a good idea.
Yes, 100%. Isaac, what do you got?
Yeah, first, I think if Toyota wanted to really innovate, they'd just take a video of a Helix driving through Afghanistan. Those things are still indestructible. But no, I really like what Pat brought up of, you know, we've stripped away the actual ability to innovate, because innovation used to not be a fringe thing that happened once every like 10 or 20 years. It used to be constant. Like there were just constant innovation. And like thinking about, you know, participation trophies, and even thinking about like academia, like what academia used to be was a place where philosophical minds got together and debated and argued and really saw if their ideas held to a kind of standard that academia accepted. And if they did, awesome, we have something now that we can develop and figure out and dive into. And if it didn't, then like, that's okay. Don't like be so overly tight to those beliefs, and be open to change your mind to the thing that, you know, broke your philosophical belief. And so we even stripped that away from colleges. Like we can't just like openly debate each other. And I think that's where innovation from a philosophical standpoint happens, is in those tough conversations and debating and being open-minded to talking to people who will counter your belief. And we've stripped that away. And so it's not strange to me to see the level of innovation dampen down, and we just become copies and mimics, because to a point, it's actually to our detriment to be innovative thinkers.
This is, I wrote down here that expansion is needed for invention. And I think this is, at least where I got this was, where was the biggest jumps in invention? And I thought back in time to big periods of expansion. New problems were being found. Like, oh, dang, now we got to deal with this. Well, how are we going to deal with it? And it creates this level of invention because there are a whole bunch of new problems through expansion, through the develop. And when societies would collide with one another, there would be a massive influx of innovation and invention based on the fact that you had new cultures coming together. You have new ideas. You have people openly debating things, going like, well, what about this and what about that? And so I'm wondering that perhaps maybe if we're not seeing a lot of innovation in our world around us, that it's the fact that we're not expanding in the world enough, if that makes sense. I want to get your guys' thoughts on this. Do you think that's a viable theory? Pat, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I believe that that's part of it, but I believe also the fact that there's nowhere to push the yardstick if we're not making one. You know what I mean? Like people wouldn't try out for special operations if there wasn't special operations. If we just like, well, we don't really need that, or there's nothing there to do. Why would soldiers really push themselves, into that? I won't say like, that almost like collegiate or Olympic athlete level fitness and increase their professionalism and all that stuff like that, unless there wasn't a yardstick there. That's why competition and things like things like our defense our defense roles in different countries and stuff like that. This is why innovation gets pushed, because we have to, or we want to as humans, to push that yardstick. But if the yardstick is taken away, I mean, like if tomorrow you take the Olympics away, how many people are going to be into freaking track and field? And where are those records going to go? Those, like, no one's going to be pushing to break records anymore. I mean, there will be the odd guy. Don't get me wrong, and there's going to be the odd guy that's always trying to push innovation. There is those people that always think that way. But as a collective human race, the way that we push the yardstick is you have to have these arenas in which these extreme events can happen, in control, and a lot of times in controlled situations, so that we can see the outcome. It's almost like a giant science experiment, even though it's like F1 super fun and super awesome, and there's like all the speed and fun. It's one giant science technology experiment, right? And so yeah, you take away the yardsticks, we got nothing. So
I had thought, and then I lost it. I'm going to come back to it. Isaac, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily have much to add to that. I think he's spot on. We're incentivized to innovate, and without those incentives, there's no need to innovate. It's just because innovation's uncomfortable, and if there's no incentive to being uncomfortable, then why be uncomfortable? And what used to be a Stoic philosophy has now turned into like, well, what's the point except a lifetime of discomfort? And like that makes no sense. And unfortunately, that way of thinking makes sense. Like that's like, yeah, that makes sense. Why be uncomfortable for the sake of being uncomfortable if at the end it doesn't matter, right? But it does if you use that discomfort to create something that can impact a lot of other people. And for some reason, we've gotten away from that as a society, as a human race, and it's unfortunate because innovation can create some bad if gone wrong, but can create a lot of good. I mean, and for a variety of things. Look at SOG and SAS, like kind of inventing guerrilla warfare, but that breeds into even like enterprise level, like guerrilla marketing tactics and stuff. Like a lot of these things like grow outside of what that one innovation was, and it streams across a vast variety of sectors and industries. And if we don't allow that level of thinking and experimentation, it's a lot more than just that one thing that loses advantage.
I wonder how much this has to do with never quite giving up on a hypothesis. Like the question you ask in any science experiment, right? For F1, it would be, how fast can a car go? How fast can we get a car to go? How far can we push drivers? What's the limit of G on the body for fighter pilots, right? Like asking that question and then just never really stopping the experiment. Never really give up on the question itself. Shaun, what do you think?
Yeah, that's all good in theory. except there's a human testing the theory. And so, interestingly enough, just the other day, I put up a photo of me jumping off the back of a CC 130, old schooly, with a free fall rig on, and looking like a 1940s Jason Bourne. And interestingly, a guy dropped into my comments and had some sort of loose reference to, wow, that looks like a tough rig, or that'd be a tough pull or whatever. My only response to him was, yeah, 11 G's. And so that means nothing to anyone unless they've experienced 11 G's. It's just a number with a letter behind it. But when you experience 11 G's on a pull, it's like a different understanding of the technical term 11 G's. And so that is the case for F1. What you're proposing, Chance, is, well, how far can we push it? What are our limits? That's what drives us, and that's all good. But then there's a human in that cockpit, and the human has limits. And depending on the human in there, they'll either go all the way and beyond, or they'll tap out just before the whole thing goes sideways. And so we put limits in place to some of these moments, the F1 as it were. F1 could have probably been even faster than it is right now, but there are limits in place. And the reason they put those limits in place is to save the human from the human. And so, like Imitation, someone sees a fast car go by, wow, I want to be an F1 driver. Innovation, they spend their entire life learning how to be an F1 driver. One day they're in their cockpit doing 1 billion miles an hour, and all the red lights are going off on the driving panel. Then the human gets to decide whether they push beyond the limit into a new void, or they quote unquote play by the rules and stay safe. And so the mindset in that moment, the human in that moment, Chuck Yeager in that moment, we can talk about imitation and innovation as sterile words. We can use 11G as a throwaway phrase for some kid on the internet who doesn't know what it means. But to the human in the moment, these things have meaning. And that individual is either going to change the course of humanity by pushing beyond up in past the stratosphere and then arcing back down for the first time ever, or not. And so I think we can talk about imitation and innovation, but generally speaking, what we're talking about is the man behind the steering wheel, or the woman behind the camera, or the whatever. It's the person. It's not the concept.
Pat, you're nodding your head furiously. What do you got?
I'm just nodding my head because I'm just really enjoying this conversation, and we're coming around to again to the whole fact about the human factor, right? That whole soft truth thing that I think we've seen. I know me and Shaun have seen in many of hallway, that software is more important than hardware. You look at something like Rally Group B. Group B was shut down because the machines were getting so fast and so powerful and so out of control that, the human factor, even though our ego said, yeah, we can control this car, people were dying. It's kind of like, okay, we need to pull the brakes on this a little bit and kind of re-look at the rules. And that's why some of the rules in F1 even have changed a lot of times, is for safety of the human. Because if you create a yardstick and you create that competition, you create that void that Shaun was talking about to exploit and go into, and our ego wants it for whatever reason, personal challenge, ego, to be the first, whatever it is, right? There is that human factor where we're like, can I do it, right? And we will sacrifice ourselves as a whole society. There are guys that have died, people that have died trying to reach that next level. But without that, there's no spark, there's no motivation for innovation again. I'm coming back to that. When that guy sees that person crash that Group B car, and the race team and the engineers and everybody goes, well, crap, what could we have, they go through the AR, what could we have done differently? And some guy from the back of the room, just finishing engineering school, goes, oh, why don't we just do this? And everyone goes like, what? Oh, wait, yes, let's do that. You know, it wouldn't have happened without that environment, without that arena. And I think our timeline in which we innovate would be much slower if we didn't have some of these things.
Yes, death is one of the drivers in a lot of these things. But so then let me ask you about this too, because does that mean that the pursuit of that originality, that the pursuit of that innovation from ourselves, is that more ego or is it more progress? Like, is it where is the line drawn between, I want to do this better and I want to be better, right? Like, where's that line fall, Isaac? What are you thinking?
I think it could be ego, but I also think a good word is conviction. Because the people who have died doing extreme stuff knew the line that they were signing on for. Like they knew the risk, and sometimes they knew that risk was actually more likely than the safety, and they still were like, yeah, that's fine. Like, it's no, you could die. Yeah, I know. Like, but there's no real benefit. And they're like, for me, it is. As Shaun said, it's that internal experience that actually has meaning. Like, for me, it is. And I'm not an advocate for death by any means, but I think a lot of people are throwing their safety guards onto others. And the people who truly want to innovate are like, get the leash off me and let me go. Like, let me see how far this goes. And if I die doing it, at least I died like doing something and not just sitting by on the sidelines to maybe watch someone else do this instead. Like, I'm here. I want to do it. I know I can do it. And if I don't, I knew the risks. And I think a lot of innovation comes from that. And we as a society say, no, don't do that. That's too dangerous. You can't do that. And it's like, why?
Well, because people get hurt and then they whine about it. Like me, I whine quite a bit. Shaun can attest to that one for sure. Shaun, what are you thinking on this one?
We all whine from time to time, all of us, me included. I try not to do it too much, but I do. And so, as does Chance. And so some of the things that Chance whines about is making clips occasionally when he's really busy. But here's the best part, using the clip as an example. Chance's clips started off as imitations of what we had both identified as best in class. Like, who out there is freaking crushing it? Let's do that. And so Chance, over a period of time, figured out his way. And now, as far as I'm concerned, like, he puts out the Clippy McClips that we deserve, that we need, that the world requires. And so, like, he imitated till now. He's innovated. His clips are different than other clips that I see out there in a way that I consider them as unique. And so, but you won't ever know that if you're a first time watcher of Chance's clips. Like, you'll never know that they used to suck. You'll never know that they're awesome right now unless you have context. And so if you show up on day one, the first thing you see is a freaking awesome clip, then it's like, oh, yeah, that was pretty good. But if you know where it came from, like from a caveman with a big stick in his hand, like, it's come a long way. So innovation isn't often appreciated unless it's contextualized, is the first thing that I would like to say. The second thing that I'd like to say is, so F1, if we're using that as the example, that has taken society as a whole a long way. But what it has done is it's created passion. So technology and passion are two different things. So Isaac is an example. If he's getting into technology is a tough game because it's, to some degree, and I'm going to use a word that'll put some people off, but it'll make my point, it's sterile. It's hard to get passionate about ones and zeros or AI unless you see the big picture, unless you see where the future lies, unless you understand what the upside is to AI. You won't care about AI. It's impassioned. It's passionless. And so, but then if you're a person who sees the potential and you have some inbuilt passion, all of a sudden AI is exciting. And so how do you explain how exciting AI is to your neighbor unless you've got passion? If you're going to brief your neighbor on AI, they're going to yawn for sure. But if you can bring something to the table in your innovative proclamation, then people will start buying in. And so you don't have to be an innovative genius that cracks home runs out of the park every single day. What you do have to have is an idea and some passion. That's what I would like to say.
So I have a thought then on that, is that you made me think of like trendsetters. People are, when new innovations arrive in the market and there are people that like, that's the future. Yes, I am going to do that thing. For instance, but also on the flip side of that, there's the people who are like, that is insane. Why would you risk doing that thing when we know where we're at right now? And what reminds me of is like there used to be a thriving manure collection businesses all over the world when cars didn't exist. And then all of a sudden cars did exist and they became a thing. They became kind of a household thing. Now all of a sudden you have people who are out careers that had been around forever. The milkman, right? The post office nowadays actually is starting to slide away. You stop seeing as many postal workers. And so my question is like, I guess seeing the future versus holding on to the past, because there's lots of cool things out there in the world. There's lots of neat little trinkets and widgets and new stuff that you could jump on and be like, yes, I'm going to get passionate about this thing and I'm going to do this new thing and it's going to be all grand. But at the same time, you could invest all that time into doing something that you are doing already. So I guess when to jump ship is the question I have. When to jump ship when you see this new thing versus staying with what you know. Pat, let's hit you first. What do you got?
Interesting. It's interesting because a lot of innovation is funny. I was just going to add on that, it's obviously emotion driven from a certain point. You know what I mean? Like whether it's anger or passion or whatever it is, we're creating stuff for war or whatever. And then it's like, why is this new thing the thing? And I think that doesn't come from the same place. It doesn't come from that same emotion to drive to change something or make something. It's just a lot of times it fits you can see where it fits in the chain of efficiency or whatever it was invented. I'll take like a 3D printer. I have a 3D printer, love it. I can print everything. I have no real passion for 3D printing, right? But I can see where it fits in my life. I can see where I can use it. I needed a friggin' zip tie clip the other day. Stores were closed. I printed out 20 of them in like a half an hour. You know what I mean? And it was like, oh, like this just fits my life. And then, it could drive innovation because then I go, oh, let's play with Tinkercad. I don't like the design of this chain guard on my mountain bike. I can start playing around with this and I can print out like, that's another thing is like where that technology gap helps us close novel idea, I think is really cool. I guess I've kind of like zipped on a bit of a on the conversation here, kind of pivoted a bit because as new things are invented, whether it's AI, 3D printers, or any other type of like thing like that, allows us the ones that have this open brain, I guess we can call it, that think on a different level. We can play and tinker and mess with things and there's no real consequence. There's no life consequence. There's no even monetary consequence. I print something in 3D, I use like 100 grams of filament. That's like 20 cents. You know what I mean? So if I totally screwed up, who cares? I lost time was the only thing I lost. I just find that all interesting. I don't even know where I'm going with this.
I believe I'm tracking. I think I know what you're talking about. Isaac, what do you got?
Yeah, the world is always changing. right? And there's never been a time in history where we took a technological advancement back. It's impossible to put the genie back in the bottle. The genie's out, right? So now you have to learn how to move forward with that decision that we as a humanity made to make this thing and steer it in the right direction, right? And to do that, it takes more innovation. I think that's why this whole age of AI right now makes everyone uncomfortable, because this one fundamental innovation is causing now a lot more people to have to innovate, and it scares them because it's new and it's uncomfortable and it's different. So how can we move forward as a society and bring more in like opportunities for innovative thinkers out of a society where innovation is scary and dangerous?
That's a dang good question, Shaun. What do you got?
Well, it's good that you raised that point, Isaac, because I was thinking about it a few minutes ago, and it was when Pat was talking about how the age that we're in right now of 3D printers and all of the sort of rapid advantages that we've got as creative people, how we can produce an outcome. And so, as Pat was saying all of that, it made me realize that there is a stark difference between today and the blacksmith of 300 years ago. That blacksmith creates a new horseshoe. It's the best horseshoe in the world. It comes to him like a flash of a lightning bolt. He goes out there, hammers out the new version, and presto changeo, all horses on the planet are now gaining an advantage because of the horseshoe. But it's going to take like a freaking 100 years for that idea to spread across the planet. That dude is dead before he even realizes the impact he made. And I would say that that's been the case right up until recently, where the common man, where the technology is being democratized enough or has been spread across the planet enough, being made available enough, the poorest kid in the world with the worst internet connection in the world, with a goofy little old laptop, can not maybe quickly, but in short order can invent something new to the planet. And so we have this, everyone on the planet now. You don't have to be the best blacksmith in the world. You've just got to have curiosity. Anyone on the planet is now an inventor, but only if you believe you are.
Mic drop moments. I love it. Now, so on that then, because yes, technically anybody and everybody with access to the information that we have right now could invent all kinds of things, but they're not. Like, and there's another line on this as well between doing something for our own interests and doing things for money, right? There, if Pat's got a 3D printer and he goes, "Oh man, I got this new bike guard that I want to put on my a new chain guard that I want to put on my bike, and it is awesome. And oh man, I can print out 15 of these in 30 minutes. Well, what if I run my machine all day? What if I have 10 machines? What if I have 15 machines? How many of these can I sell to people?" And then it becomes a business, it becomes an innovation, it becomes money incoming, as we were talking about earlier, where that line is, right?
Well, it can. It could. But it won't unless Pat really wants to make some money. And that money won't be made unless Pat is willing to put up with the hassle of making that money. Because, like, I've had enough businesses that it's a freaking hassle to make money as an entrepreneur. It just is. It's not like you roll out of bed and someone hands you a cappuccino and you saunter down to the Ritz-Carlton for your brunch and then head back home and watch Netflix, and that's your day. If you're inventing things, it's a hard slog. And so at that point, that binary decision between, am I going to sell bike guards to my friends or not, as I've seen it throughout my life, two different people exist in that moment. There's the person who wants to make money just for money's sake. And then there's the person who wants to do right by their friends, who just wants to make a difference, who wants to make the world better. So making the world better and making money, they can cooperate together. But I've found in the past that most individuals in that moment either go left or right. It's all about the money or it's all about making the world better. And it's not that common that the two things exist simultaneously in that second.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not that they can't coexist, but it's pretty rare to see. Isaac, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was actually like writing down a thought. Pat could be making a chain guard and being like, wow, this thing's awesome. And then being like, man, I want other people to experience how awesome this thing is. And so I want to put it out there, but it costs money to make this thing. It costs money for the materials. It costs money to keep the printer running. It costs money for the energy bill that's rising because I'm running this thing. So I need to be able to cover those costs. But then demand happens and you start to realize, okay, maybe this is bigger than I thought. And this is where that divergence happens. Someone thinks I can make a lot of money. And then where I believe as a kind of capitalistic entrepreneur in the US, my goal isn't just to make a lot of money. It's to be able to see like, hey, my country is in an economic crisis right now. And instead of just having them like just print billions of more dollars, like I could actually help circulate money in our economy. I could help boost local economies by producing more commerce and being a part of this marketplace as a positive experience, and like not just using the money I make to hoard to myself and buy some island, somewhere in a private jet, but I can actually inject that capital into the economy and create more wealth for everyone that interacts in that economy. And so it's like, again, Shaun says like it's a sterile environment unless you have that big vision and you understand what it is you're doing and why you're doing it, so you don't get lost in that sterile environment and lose focus, or in this case get lost in the money environment and lose focus of what the mission was, because money can change your motives real fast if you don't have a strong character and a strong will. And so it's like when Pat makes that decision of like, okay, I'm going to start making these things because I want other people to experience it, and then he has that decision to make: do I grow this or do I shut it down right now? Well, if I grow it, I actually could do a lot of good for the people around me and for the community projects around me and for boosting the economy. Because right now, like all the neighborhoods that I see that used to be thriving and awesome are like slums now. And it's not fair to the people stuck there because they don't have the ability to take part in this commerce, and everything is, the government given to us and not us taking care of each other. And I think I can actually make that difference. And if he makes that decision, then suddenly he has a new purpose for that business that's making money, if that makes sense. And I think that's a novel thought process within the marketplace.
Yeah, I really like where you're going with this one, and it reminds me of the journey I had, not monetarily, but with podcasting. Because when I first started, it was because I was getting information that I was looking around that people weren't. And I wanted to help the people that didn't have that information. And so I started pushing it out to the boys, and then it started from there. But the original motivation was, I want to help my community. How do I do that right now? And I think that as a base motivation for innovation is, you see it quite a bit in history. A lot of the psychology and modern psychological medicine, things like that, is all driven from wanting to help other people. Pat, what do you got? Thoughts?
It's interesting. This whole thing. Where was I going with this? I wanted to talk about like that whole personal innovation and the money thing. Go back to like Shaun saying everyone could be an inventor. Well, everyone's a photographer. We can go back to the photo contest. Everybody's a photographer. You got an iPhone, you take a picture of something, you're a photographer. what you're trying to push the yardstick of photography, like you're trying to take that picture that someone just literally can't stop looking at, wants to see it. Like when we think of inventions, that's the same thing, right? This novel thought, and yeah, for me, money means zero when it comes to my photography, other than the fact that I need these biosurvival tickets to friggin' exchange for goods and services. Then I'm like, okay, well, I guess I have to charge for my photography. I have to figure out what it would cost to do this when I'd rather just be creating. I look at my friend, he's a great case study in this whole thing. He's one of our gunsmiths. And some of the things, his IQ is beyond most. And so they had this contract for a breaching kit. And they had the US government put this out. And so their company bid on it. And he invented something, because when you blow a wall, a lot of time there's rebar there and you can't have to deal with the rebar. So he invented this, and you've probably seen them because they've been on the market now for a while. Basically, it goes onto an A2 flash hider, has a C cut in it. You stick it into the rebar, you give it a half cock to center it, fire the round, boom, you've cut your rebar. Boom, 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 boom. Cut your rebar in the building you can breach. He expected $0 for that. He just wanted to invent it. Like if this guy had a business manager, or they took him and stole him and shoved him into the basement of FN, Fabrique Nationale, and just made him invent stuff, his innovation level would be beyond that. He could give zero F's about dollars. In fact, he doesn't want anything to do with it. He just wants to sit in his workshop and innovate. And I think that there is that difference of a person, right? And hopefully with some of the bigger innovations that come in life, like either sometimes those ideas have been stolen, because then he goes and sees Griffin Armaments at SHOT Show that year, like 6 months later, and they have it on their shelf, and the guy's like, oh, I bet you wonder what that is. He's like, no, I invented that. You know what I mean? And kind of walked away, didn't care. Right. So I wonder how much some of these innovations have actually been like, lifted or stolen or taken from other people that they don't care. They just want to see the world move forward, or see the sport move forward, or see the economy move forward, or see the peace move forward, whatever it is.
I wonder not only how much some is stolen, because obviously there's stuff stolen all the time, but also how many other people were in a similar situation and came up with the same conclusion, because there were probably other gunsmiths that were in the same situation going, well, how do we deal with rebar? And it could have been happening at the same time, and so those innovations come out at a very similar time. I watched a clip with I think it was Rick Rubin, and he was like, do you ever have those moments where you have this thought in your head and you're like, man, this would be a great thing if somebody just invented it, and then like 6 months later it's all over the shelves and people are raving about it? And that's usually because that thing is needed now, is that it has a time space kind of allotment, that this is where the problem has been presented to the people, and the people have come up with this almost a similar solution, which I think is part of it. Shaun, what do you got for thoughts?
I do like Rick Rubin, but I don't care for his comment there. And so the reason being that when you put it across that way, man, like there's a real need for that. I just wish someone would invent that in 6 months. You know what that is? That's someone outwardly proclaiming how lazy they are, or how uninterested they are in creating the solution. Because when someone says, I really wish, what they're saying is, I'm not that interested. Because if you really were, you'd get to work. I really wish someone would save the planet. Get to work. And so if you want to make a new flashlight really bad, you will, or you won't, depending on how badly you want it. And that is the way of the world, man. The horseshoe, the wheel, the fire, the thing, name anything. AI, doesn't much matter. Anything that is being created is a result of someone who didn't shrug their shoulders and say, I just wish someone would. I am wired that I just can't think that way. I just wish someone would. I don't think that. What I do is I go do it. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to solve it. But if I start that sentence in my mind, I'm trying to do it already. I'm trying to fix the problem. But I have to be selective. So that's an interesting, perhaps, learning opportunity, is if you're not a person who thinks, I just wish someone would look after me, if you're a person who thinks, I'm going to go frickin' make that happen, then there's a downside to that. If you're a make it happen person, you got to realize that you got to keep yourself in check at times. You can't be fixing everything. You can't carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. You can't like do it all. And I don't think that I do it all, but I know that I do too much from time to time. Because when my eye catches something that interests me, I want to fix it, or I want to make it better, or I want to see where it goes, or I want to know what's around the corner. What can I do with that thing that maybe no one else has ever done before? And to your point, Chance, as Pat was relaying the story about the rebar cutting, yeah, maybe there was a billion other people who were thinking the exact same idea simultaneously across the planet, but that's extremely unlikely. And so if it was a common thing that occurs on the regular, our planet would look different. But it doesn't, because these kind of ideas are quite rare, believe it or not. And the individual who doesn't do anything about it, like the individual who thought it, maybe created it in his mind and then just didn't do anything about it. Like, I think that way on a pretty regular basis. And so I totally get what Pat is talking about. And if I was the same dude in SHOT Show and I saw it up on a wall, I would act the same way. Whatever, man. Cool story. And then keep on walking. Now, what is interesting, though, is as that dude walks down the hallway thinking, whatever, man, I wonder, and I don't need an answer, only he can answer it. I wonder if he's a little bit resentful. Because sometimes I get a bit resentful when I have the idea and I'm thinking like, I'm too busy, or man, that'd be so much work, or holy, I'm sure a million other people on the planet just simultaneously had the same idea, so why would I even bother? Like if I'm thinking those things and I don't do anything about it, like I get a bit resentful because I know I could have, and I know I probably should have. That woulda, shoulda, coulda resentment. That's a killer, man. So just chucking that back at you guys.
I
dig
won't
it.
I won't answer for Craig fully here, but we're really good friends. And so Griffith Armor was the one that took that invention. They also bidded on the contract. So this was a larger contract as a whole breaching package, which was in bid for the US government. Griffith was in on that bid. They didn't have that piece in there. But because Craig didn't protect anything with patents or anything else, he just wanted to invent. You're privy to see those other bids. And so they seen that, we're like, look at that. And I know that there is a little bit of resentment there. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's a normal dude, normal middle class kind of like living guy. You know what I mean? And some of these inventions could have probably put him in a different place. So I'm sure there's a bit of resentment, but 90% of the time, he just wants to create.
There's a there's a time cost analysis that you got to do on all these things, right? Like podcasting is one of them for us, Shaun, is the fact that we had to be able to carve out the time, especially the first year. Holy jeez, did we ever have to carve out that time? But it was beneficial to us. We could see the benefit of the time allotment that we were putting in. And as you said earlier, you invent something, well, are you willing to put the work in? Because now you got to set up the infrastructure, you got to set up the all the stuff, right? So there's that analysis it's important for sure. Isaac, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I have two thoughts here. One is, like with the breaching kit, right? It reminds me of Elon Musk when he was creating like Teslas and even like the rockets and SpaceX. He open sourced everything. And they're like, why would you open source things? Because people can steal your stuff. He goes, I just want to create accessible electric vehicles, and I want to make space travel accessible. And if I'm the only one doing it, it's never going to happen. But if other people take and expand on and innovate the ideas, they're always going to be behind us because they're taking our information. So if they're taking our information, we're always going to be tip of the spear. But now they're branching it to other markets that wouldn't be getting mine. And so they're just continuing on the mission that I have, that I'm creating this for. And whether that was his true intention or not, I don't know, but that's what he said. And it resonates of like, if I walk down the street and someone else is doing that same thing, it's like, cool. Like, I open sourced it for a reason. to make it more accessible to everyone else. So why would I be mad whenever they're doing the exact thing that I wanted? That's more of an introspective look of like, was I doing it for a false altruism? But that is a whole other topic for another day. But the other thing I wanted to bring up too was like when innovating, there's also a cost of pursuing something that others don't see yet because it is a novel idea. And so like from my personal experience, because it's what I can talk from, pursuing this new tech company, sacrificed a lot to do it. And I have an amazing wife who puts up with all the headaches that I cause from, just trying to innovate and do things that we don't see that bridge built. I'm that guy that jumps out of the plane and then builds the parachute, packs it and puts it on the way down. Like that's just kind of my personality, even sometimes my own detriment. And I had all these external influences saying like, why are you doing that? You're putting your family at jeopardy. You're not doing the responsible thing. Just get a normal job. Like do what, be responsible, be an adult. Like you're a man, act like a man, but they don't see what it is that I see. And I don't expect them to, so I don't hold it against them at all. There is zero animosity in my heart for anybody because I get where they're coming from, but they don't have that novel thought. They don't have the same vision. And so I do think that there's also a cost to pursuing novel thought and novel innovation when other people don't understand what it is that you're doing, and allowing yourself to be ostracized and having grace and empathy for the people who are ridiculing you, knowing that one day they'll get it. And so I don't need to hold any discontent. I'm just going to keep pursuing the thing that my vision has.
You bring up a good point. You say you don't have to hold on to that discontent, but that doesn't mean that discontent doesn't show up every once in a while, because I'm sure there's thoughts and feelings, and then that's got to be a struggle to remain authentic to the idea, to the innovation, remain authentic to the mission. And I'm wondering, do you think that says more about your craft, like your process, or more about your own personality, your identity of who you are? What do you think? I'm going to come right back to you, Isaac.
I would say it's a personality thing, because with this, I was not like, I've used, language models since they started, but I was never a coder. I was never a developer. I was never a software engineer. I was essentially just a fitness coach who understood how to pick stuff up and put it down in a better way, and understood a little bit of business to help other people get into business. But I saw a need that business owners had and no solution for it, or solutions that weren't being done right and were wasting people's money and causing more headaches and causing a lot of like cuts into the workforce, where people were losing their jobs for things that didn't even work. And so it made me aggravated, and I wanted to solve that problem. And once I got into it, I realized, hey, this is a fun problem to solve. And because it's so novel, this is like the closest to an alchemist I could ever feel, where I can like code something or bring something, and it's like, whoa, I actually see it work. And it's not been done like this before. And like, it's cool. And despite what everyone else thinks, like, I've never really put much weight to that, because I've always been that person that's done things that other people think is somewhat crazy. Like pretty much everyone who ever is a guest on here has done things that people would hear stories of and be like, I would never do that. Right. But it's that personal conviction that I have, that a lot of these people have that are on this show of, I don't really put much weight on what other people think. I've already lived through that part of my life. I let it go a long time ago. That's ego. And when something internally gets me, it's typically not their fault. It's internal somewhere. I have to take ownership of my own ego and where it's getting checked. And if it can't let go of it, that's something that I need to have some introspection on and figure out like why. And it's typically stemmed from my own belief about myself or my own self-worth. And it's like, that's not, there's no place for that. So really it's actually a good thing when I feel that kind of resentment, because it shows that there's a small place in me that still needs work. And so that's how I look at it. I would love to hear what Shaun and Pat think.
Yeah, absolutely. Pat, what do you got?
I mean, I don't know if I can add much to that. It's really interesting as we talk about innovation, all this stuff. I think there's like a personal innovation, and then there's a collective innovation. What we do to innovate, to do things novel in our own lives, in our own world, and how we present ourselves to the world. Innovation. I've taken things from the military that I use in my personal life now. Um, you know what I mean? So they're innovated in the military, but not necessarily are they part of my world now. I'm constantly innovating who Pat is, constantly creating, because the innovation at the end of the day is creation. And if you don't have that spark or kind of mindset or thing inside, like I said, everybody can be a photographer. Oh, look at that thing, click. You know what I mean? To create a photograph is completely different, right? To create a new suspension, to create a new language model, to create a new AI, to create a new computer, earphones, whatever, it doesn't matter. There has to be a creative element that you are utilizing as an advantage in your own life. And then does it actually possibly help the collective? And if it does, we shouldn't be afraid to push it out and have people see it and be part of it.
I dig it. Shaun, what do you got?
Well, it's a bit of a radical idea, perhaps, but I'll throw it out there anyway.
Perhaps
we're-
innovative, even.
It is innovative, and I'm actually going to use the term innovative a number of times in the next minute or so. And so I believe that to be an innovator, you can't afford to be dogmatic about anything, quite frankly. And so, and I'm not saying that's me, because I can be dogmatic about things, but I try to use them to my advantage rather than as a negative. And by dogmatic, I mean, like, maybe we'll call it stubborn until it doesn't serve me as well as it should. So, as an innovator, I believe you should be willing to put yourself out there, almost like a freak, like super quirky, super weird, super like misunderstood. At least that's how I feel at times. Isaac has said that, he's played with LLMs kind of since they came on the scene, as have I. I feel like I've got a pretty good grip on them from a perhaps non-professional basis, as a layman, as it were. But anyone who's followed me for a while would have seen me, a couple of years ago, I was putting stuff out, or a year ago, I was putting stuff out from LLMs that was like some hardcore math and science and some algorithms and some equations on not just force vectors, but on like how to run a better life through equations. And so I was just playing with the LLMs, running novel ideas against a novel entity, a novel intelligence called AI. I wanted to see what it was about. I wanted to see what I was about with it. And so I wasn't scared to play with it. And I also wasn't scared to put my playful considerations out on my social media account, because ultimately, anyone who knows me knows that that's who I am. But a lot of people who don't know me wouldn't understand why I do the things that I do. They just look at that little phase of playing with LLMs through equation-based comments as that's super weird. Why is he doing that? And so I'm doing it because it interests me. But I'm also doing it, to Pat's point, as a collective nudge. And it doesn't mean that I'm trying to make people think about their lives differently. Well, to some degree I am. But I'm just nudging constantly a collective mind. We all have our own little opinions on how this all works. But I think by just throwing our ideas back at the collective, not to have them tested, not to have them evaluated, not to have them pass or fail, but just keep throwing ideas out there, someone will always pick up what you're putting down and play with it and maybe make it better. That's how I see things. If I throw something up that's a weird AI equation, there's someone out of all the people who follow me that will look at that and think, oh, I'm going to start a company tomorrow based on a new idea that I just got. And so that's how I feel we evolve as a group, is by daringly exposing your own uniqueness to the collective.
I dig that. And I got a question on it. So you mentioned the fact that we can't be dogmatic about things, but every dogma was an innovation at some point, right? So like the stuff that we joke about in the forces, and we're like, oh, we're gonna go do the same thing that we've been doing for the 30 years, and here's a new innovation. They're like, nope. Well, whatever they were teaching at some point was innovative. So again, how do we figure out what our differences are between our capacity for innovation, right? Because we can only take on so much. We have to have programs that work, right? I wake up in the morning, I make my bed, I get my kids to school, I have a set schedule. And if that deviates, it affects my day, but it's not.
Well, you said it works.
You know what I mean?
You said it works.
It works, yes. But eventually it could be dogmatic.
Based on contextually what works even better that you've never tried before.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it works. Maybe you've got the worst routine in the world. You know what I'm saying?
So my question is then, how do we measure progress? Right? Because if we shouldn't be dogmatic, but at the same time we need to be innovative, but those innovations eventually become dogma, but we shouldn't be dogmatic. We need to continually innovate. But there's got to be a bridge in between there. There's got to be a middle class. Yeah, you know what I mean, right?
I already said it. I mean, it's competition. I mean, he's already established. Like either you're participating, or either you're in the Olympics, standing next to a bunch of people, or you're in the Olympics in your mind. So now I asked you very specifically, do you have the best routine? And maybe you do, maybe you don't. But you'll never know until you start competing against your routine. That's what I do. I compete against Shaun. I'm my biggest competitor. If I'm in an actual competition, like if we're all in a photo competition right now, and someone has to have the best photo by the end of the day, I'll frickin' win. Or not. It doesn't much matter to me because I'll engage like I want to win. And I'll be competing against Shaun. I'm not trying to beat Pat, Chance, and Isaac, though to some degree I am, because in the sort of collegial-like competition spirit, like I do love the friction of bumping up against another guy in a competition and kind of looking him in the eye and going a bit harder. I love that. I love competition. But I'm always chasing Shaun, who's usually about a foot ahead of me. So dogmatic versus complete chaos in your approach to a routine, that's for the individual to decide what works best for them. But innovatively, you'll never know unless you start setting up a competition to metric yourself. And so maybe your yardstick chance is how you feel at the end of the day, or how you wake up in the morning. Do you feel good about who you are as a man just before you go to sleep? Or when you wake up in the morning, do you feel, you did the worst job ever? So the metrics, as it were, are not like hard numbers, maybe. It's not how many push-ups you can do in a day, but it's how you feel about yourself. And I think, honestly, that a large part of what we're talking about is hard to calculate when it comes to innovation. Because if we all started innovating something today, we may never see the result of our innovation before we die. But if we feel every day when we wake up like, frickin' man, this is so worth it, then who cares if you ever see the result before you die? You're living the result in the moment. You are the result to some degree. And so, again, just throwing it back at you, Chance, do you have the best routine in the world? Well, are you running an Olympic level competition every day,
In that regards, no. My routine is not the best in the world, but it is effective right now with my schedule. So I can put it that way. Pat, what are you thinking?
One of the things I'm thinking about big time here is about test beds. Sean was saying, like, when he's doing those equations, like, doesn't care if anyone takes it out and tests it. You should. Like, if we're being creative enough that we're putting this out to the world, I want it to be tested. I want it to be tested in a zillion different situations and scenarios. And I want people to be like, yeah, I want to open that debate, and I like to do that because of the whole yardstick pushing comes from that test bed, right? And that evaluation. I mean, sometimes it's just something like, to improve your daily routine and you're doing that, but it still has to be tested. You have to have some sort of metric to be like, was it faster? Even if it's a stopwatch, you know what I mean? To say, oh, I was able to compress this time, or I felt better, or everybody else was happy when they got into the car. It doesn't matter what the test bed is. It has to be a test bed to create new innovation. Going back to your point about dogma, yeah, it was a new idea at one point. You know what I mean? Like, we're going from, like, we'll say bow and arrow to rifle. You know what I mean? Well, the whole thing had to change, right? And someone had to come up with it, but it had to be tested, right? Just like the gunfighter program kind of came up in the infantry, like in the the 2000s there. It was like, okay, like, some of our drills are a bit dogmatic. This is what's saving lives, is moving faster. So I'm not saying that innovation has to save lives or anything. It just has to create, I think, improvement. Now, when we talk about imitation and that innovation thing, it's interesting how it can be cheated. So we go back to the Group B rally. There was a point where the Audi Quattro and the Lancia Stratos were like the two main cars, the drivers, the cars, everything. Lancia Stratos, most people don't know this, it's out now because years later, the roll cage was made out of paper mache to drop weight, to be faster, to create that speed. If they would have rolled that car, the driver is kaput for sure. But the driver still got in that car and still pushed that car to the win, right? And then down the road, someone's like, oh, maybe we should make our roll cage out of, say, titanium, or we need to find weight savings here. Sometimes those little, I'll say, shortcuts can create new innovation, but if they're left as shortcuts, create a detriment or possible, even catastrophic event.
You remind me, I just recently saw Ford versus Ferrari, and which was a neat little movie, but one of the innovations they showed in that was that instead of changing brakes, they changed the entire upper assembly, but because it's a single part, right? And it's just the not quite shortcutting the rule, but like using the letter of the rule to get around a technicality. I love just that little bit of innovation from it. It's awesome. Isaac, what are you thinking?
I think a lot of good points are brought up. And when it comes to like dogma and innovation, dogma was innovation that became a rule set. And it gets ingrained. Something that got me in trouble quite often in my military life was always asking why. Why are we doing this? And whenever it was like, it's just the way it's done, I wouldn't accept that as an answer. Like, even as a junior Marine, like, I would get in trouble a lot. So I'm like, that's a dumb answer, Gunny. Like, give me a new answer. And then once I became, a leader of Marines, it was like asking the, colonels and generals, like, why? Why is this why we're doing it? Because this is the result, and the result doesn't always, like, atrophy happens. And just that's a law of thermodynamics. It's part of a law of life. Like, entropy happens. And so entropy is going to happen if we keep the same rule set over a long period of time. It will start to slow down. It will start to become a net worse result over time. And so we have to constantly be asking, why? Why do we do this way? Is there a better way to do this? Can we think from a different lens or from a different perspective on this problem set to come up with a new hypothesis for a solution? Test it and see if it's better. And sometimes you test it by actually putting it out there. Like Pat said, like he wants to test it. If he made something that is for people, he wants people to test it. And sometimes he might put some out and realize, okay, maybe that wasn't better. I'll go back to the drawing board. But he doesn't quit asking, how can this be done better? And I think that is a sign of a innovative mind, is someone who has the curiosity to unpack the reason why we do certain dogmatic things and think, like, is there a level of expansion or a level of of experiences since this dogma was innovation. And can we now take what we have in our own experiences, in our own worldviews, in our own technological advancements to create a new innovation that changes the rules of this dogmatic system that we're in?
You know, it reminds me of what happens when you take a copy of a copy. And you take a copy of that copy, and you take a copy of that copy, and you take a copy of that copy. There's the degradation, which is exactly what you're talking about. And it reminded me, I saw something online at one point in time, and they were talking about what would be needed in terms of genetic diversity to repopulate the planet. Like all of a sudden everyone dies, right? What would be the bare minimum amount of people we could repopulate civilization with? And it was 50. In order to get a genetic diversity large enough that would create novel children rather than you're not going to get incest to that kind of degree. But it made me think of, how do you innovate within a dogmatic system? Well, you need to have a level of diversity of thought for people to be able to pick up the pieces enough, to Shaun's point earlier about having a systems thinker, somebody that can take all of those different pieces and go, oh, well, what if we just put them together? And then how do we do that? And then start to develop from there. This is fantastic where we're going. Shaun, you got any other thoughts on anything?
So just to play with what you said, I do believe that there is synergy created when systems thinkers are sitting next to each other in, either virtually or physically. And that is because systems thinkers understand how other systems thinkers work. And that expedites a process, that expedites the idea in the room at the time, whatever the idea is that the systems thinkers are working on. Now, what is interesting about that moment, Chance, and this is for everyone, I'm not like explaining this just to Chance, is if you have a bunch of systems thinkers in the room, who's running the room will determine the outcome. And so by running the room, I don't mean like who's got the white hard hat and is the boss. I'm talking about like who's actually running the room. Like who's the player, like behind the curtain, for lack of a better term, or who is actually the person in that room. And it might not be the boss. It might just be the person who's running the room. Through their vibe, through their experience, through their intent, through their presence, through their charisma, whatever it is, the person who's actually running the room doesn't have to be the CEO or the boss. So if that person is a systems thinker running a room full of systems thinkers, some pretty cool things will start happening pretty quickly. But if the wrong person's running that room, it'll fracture. It'll go nowhere. We won't see the fruit of their labor. And so I find it interesting that as any system thinkers out there would, I believe, also find it interesting if they've been in this moment, the room decides the outcome, sometimes more so than the individual decides the outcome.
Interesting, Pat. What are you thinking?
No, I agree with Shaun. Going back to Ford versus Ferrari, I mean, that was a great example of a lot of innovation. The amount of work that Ken Miles put into that GT40 was, it was what made that whole movie. And you have this guy who thinks completely outside the box, and it was, you didn't just have the brake thing. There was other things. There's transmission, there's overheating problems. There's so many things that Ken put into that car, and I love the one scene. You know, working with your tool set to find these innovations, and just how a lot of these people come with different thoughts and things to the game, right? Like at one point they had the Ford nerd there, and they've got this computer hooked up to the car, and they're like, oh, we don't understand why the car's doing this. And they're like, they basically ripped the computer out, and the engineer is freaking out, and they taped strands of wool to the car, right? You remember this? You watched the movie recently, and they're looking at where it was alive or dead for the actual airflow over the car, right? And then they're like, oh, but it's easy, right? And everybody, because the outlier was the Ford engineer, the other guys were all already a team and they were already working on that car and they all thought similarly. So when someone goes, hey, let's tape a bunch of string to the car, right? It made sense to that collective group to friggin' make the next step in that car's evolution.
And it was a simpler solution rather than reliance on the new tech, which I think is another interesting point on that. Isaac, what are you thinking? Oh, you're muted.
Sometimes innovation isn't like creating some new technology. Sometimes it's thinking like, hey, how can we simplify this? Because over time we've gotten too much and we just have to follow that old school, like perfect age old philosophy of keep it simple, stupid, right? Like we've overdeveloped this thing that can be simplified a lot to give us an answer way faster. And so I thought that was a good example. And like with AI, like everyone's throwing AI on everything. And so sometimes we're faced with a problem that's like, oh, a simple automation will fix this. We don't need to develop a whole new technological advancement. You're just wasting your time. Just do this automation. And it does exactly what you need without the room for error of a language model. And so, yeah, sometimes it's like, man, I don't know what to do with my life. And I'm so, well, get off social media and read a book. Like you don't need to always be drowning yourself in advancement. Sometimes you need to take a step back and look at the fundamentals. And once you have the fundamentals down, innovation becomes easier.
That is a great point. And to that point, we see this a lot in the self-help realm, even the advocacy realm, veterans and all this stuff is like, everybody's got the thing that's going to save you. And all you got to do is 15 minutes, 3 times a day, blah, blah, blah. But it's cold plunge, it's hot sauna, it's jujitsu, it's friggin' reading, it's whatever it is. But I think we, in our fervor to advocate for a certain thing, we also forget that other people have lives. Like to add stuff into someone else's life is very hard. And one of the first things that helped me especially was actually deleting things, not adding things in. It was to go back to fundamentals, go back to the really simple, what is super important in your life? And Shaun says this all the time, what is the why? Why are you here? What are you doing? What is the point? Because otherwise the work is kind of superfluous. If there's no point to it, it becomes really, well, dumb in my mind. Shaun, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I have been thinking about it throughout the podcast, and Isaac just pretty much hit it in a way that I was thinking at the start of the show. And the reason I was thinking at the start of the show is because we were talking about how, as if it's imitation to innovation, with innovation, you kind of have to expand your ideas out there. You have to put them out there. You have to be like okay with being quirky or being evaluated as weird or whatever the case is. You got to expand your footprint, put yourself out there. But even as I was saying it, I was thinking like, yeah, but also, Shaun, there's a time when you have to contract, when you have to reduce your footprint, when you have to like Miyamoto Musashi into the cave and think about things for a bit. I've had to. And so, like I say, put your foot on the gas pedal and put it all the way to the floor for most of your life. But, sometimes you got to lock up the brakes, slide a bit sideways, and then hop out maybe as it's still sliding, and then saunter into a cave and sit down for a bit and think about things for a good long time. Because the penchant or the humans who are interested in exploring their limits or are interested in seeing why they're here as a human, there's a tendency to just push hard. And that tendency is to push hard with other like-minded individuals. I love it, man. I wouldn't have it any other way. But there is a time and place where you've got to lock it all down and just spend some time not hermiting out, but just getting clarity on everything to include yourself. And so, innovation, I believe part of it is you got to go out there and play with your friends in ways that are, super quirky and create novel things. but you also got to do it with yourself.
Pat, anything to add?
Well, yeah, I'm just loving the whole idea about keeping it simple, the stripping down of things, because as we innovate and as we move forward as a species, and this whole human experience, I guess we have to be responsible and cognitive enough to know if we're innovating something that is actually useful. And I'll take the Fisher Space Pen, for example. Super cool pen, pressurized, writes underwater, writes in space, rubberized, cement, ink, the whole thing. And the Russians are like, use a pencil. Like, put your efforts towards something that actually matters here. Like, we don't care about the writing instrument. A pencil works. Like, use it. And sometimes we get so wrapped up into like, oh, this thing could be so useful, and then is it? What I mean? It's cool to have that those brain steps and the thought process of going through it, but then you always have to ask yourself, when I take a photo, a lot of times if it's a picture that's important to me, the first thing I do is I put it into monochrome. I strip the color away. Is my composition even right? Is this even interesting? Is there even layers? Right? Will a crop fix it? Okay, my crop fixes it. Okay, I'm bringing my color back in. Okay, well, that's way too much color. I'm going to strip it back down again, right? Oh, clarity. Let's crank that clarity slider all the way to 100. I'm going to go for a coffee and come back and look at that picture and be like, that is horrid. That is completely horrid. You know what I mean? So being able to refine our innovations, I think, is also a beautiful, I guess we could say, art.
And refinement through the extremes, right? Zero color, all the color, and figure it out from there. Isaac, you got any thoughts?
There is, at least here in like the Midwest of the US, a phenomenon, I would say, of middle-aged, like rich dudes who just want to feel like operators, even though they've never been in the military. And so they buy all of the enhanced weapons with the extended, quick release mags, and, the cool scopes and the grips and their tactical vest and, all the right gear. And they're like going to some like shooting range with all this stuff. And it's like, you can't even run a quarter mile in a real crisis without having a heart attack. Why do you need all of this stuff? Like, Shaun could take that dude out with a pencil, like just use the pencil, right? And it's because that person, they don't actually know the craft. So they have to overcompensate and get all of this crazy stuff. They don't actually know what they're using. They don't actually know the purpose of everything. They don't know the specs of the rifle that they're shooting. It's like, what's the travel distance, and what's the drop at 500 meters? Well, I don't know. Why are you trying to be this advanced? You don't simplify. A 5.56 round is going to do the same amount of damage what you need it for. Like, you don't have to get so complicated. And so oftentimes it reminds me, like, if I'm trying to overcomplicate things, it's probably because I don't actually understand the thing that I'm doing. And I need to strip it back and really understand what is it that I'm doing. Because right now I'm probably overcompensating for something. And it's like, the best thing I heard is like, if you can't explain it to a third grader in a way that they understand, you probably still don't understand it enough yourself. And so I think as we talk about innovation, are we innovating something we actually understand from a fundamental level? And if we don't, then is our innovation actually going to be something that is a net positive? Or are we just going to be innovating a broken string of thought that we didn't actually understand or have formulated in the first place?
That is a beautiful point. We see it in jiu-jitsu all the time. Like the videos that I see online all the time, I can't say all the time, but a lot of the videos I see online don't hold up to pressure. They hold up to it looking cool and lots of spinnies and rounds of things and up and all those things, but they don't hold up to actual pressure when someone fights back. And I think that's it's part of the testing waters, I think. What do you got, Shaun?
Just a couple of, well, one thing maybe, just based on what Pat said, because I think it's quite important, to be honest, because I think it's important because it's going to let me make a point that I think is really important. And it's this. So Pat had described how he's taken a photo and, he'll adjust something. He'll adjust a slider. He'll adjust his contrast all the way up to 100%. He'll bounce. He'll come back. He'll take a look at it, think, good, not good, whatever he thinks. What Pat has done is he's, over a long period of time, he's taken a look at the extremes of his results and established what he vibes with, what he likes, what's working for him today versus what was working for him 10 years ago. And I find myself doing the same thing. However, I'm not going to say this is a pro tip, but I would like to establish this is an idea for other people out there. This morning, just 5 minutes before I came into this podcast, actually 10, what I did do was I was down in the heavy bag doing some slow motion left hooks and some elbows and stuff like that. And I thought, holy cronkamole, I'm on the show in 10 minutes. I'm going to go to my plan B as I process this video. My plan B is obviously not plan A. And I consider plan B as subordinated to plan A. Plan A is I take the time to get the colors right in the video. I take the time to get all things right in the video. And then that's my plan A. But my plan B, when I don't got a lot of time or when I've got things to do, is I take the saturation slider and I slam it all the way to the left and bam, now I'm in a black and white photo, video, whatever. Then I take sharpness, bam, all the way to 100%. And then I'll make 3 broad adjustments, and I know I can get away with it when it's black and white. And I slammed that video up lickety split with like just a couple of minutes to spare. And the product that it puts out is good. Like, it's a good video, man. It looks pretty tight in black and white and a couple of adjustments. It would have looked better if I would have taken the time. And it would have looked better to me and maybe others, but maybe not to some people, you know what I mean? So my plan B satisfies me enough that it kind of teases me to do plan A next time. But for others, they'll love on my plan B like it's a plan A. And et cetera, all the variations. And so I just want to say this, that your innovative track, your pipeline that you're in, if you don't have a plan B within your pipeline of innovation that you can quickly fall back on and feel pretty good about, well, get one right now. Start thinking about your plan B so that you can always feel like you can keep working on your plan A.
It's a great point. Isaac, what do you got?
I have a quick question. Yeah, for Pat. I'm not a photographer. I am. If you put a camera in my hands, I'll probably give you something that would make most real photographers want to throw up. But I've talked to quite a few photographers, and when I ask this question, it's typically a similar response. But I'd like to get Pat's response on here because I think it fits this conversation. Pat, do you spend more time now, after being in photography and studying it and practicing it for a while, do you spend more time now editing or being selective about the actual taking of the shot? Or did you do more of that, or did you spend more time editing in the beginning and didn't really care about as much time of prepping the right shot?
That's a good question.
It's a super good question. It's a super awesome question, actually, because it's I have multiple answers for this. So the fact that I feel I have a decent eye, I would see something and I'd take a picture and then I would want to edit it. And then as I will say, got into the addiction of my photography, I found that I was actually spending so much time editing mediocre photos, trying to make them good. Now I'm at a point where I will spend a huge amount of time. I'm going to have a photo that I'm going to release on my Instagram soon of my mountain bike. It's in my living room. It's a super bougie shot. The only thing I did edit-wise was I healed one pendant light that had creeped into the edge of my crop, and that is the only thing. The rest of it will just be sent the way that I shot it. And it took me And I won't say, like, sometimes my editing can take me long. Like this little mini shoot that we did, and it was impromptu. I didn't plan it, as I probably should have planned it better. It still took us a couple hours to get exactly what I wanted, but I have no editing to do on it now, and that's way more awesome. And then I say, as a professional photographer, if you've like purposely developed yourself and you've created that innovation, you've taken innovations that others have taken, dogma, whatever you want to call it, being able to light meter on stuff. I can go to a client, say, do a photograph and an environmental portrait. Before, what would take me the whole day took me about 45 minutes of setup. They showed up. I told them to stand on the X, bam, change angle, bam, change angle, bam, done. So as a professional, that innovation even looks better, right? Because I'm not sitting there wasting your time like, oh, my settings are wrong. Oh, I have to turn the flash up a little higher. Oh, you know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know if I really answered the question, but yeah.
You did. I have some friends who are amazing photographers, and what looks like just a National Geographic level picture, and I'll ask, like, how long did you spend editing this? They're like, oh, I did like one little tweak. Really? Yeah. It's because people like you, Pat, and people like my friend who's a photographer have understood the fundamentals in a way that's almost innovative, to where all the other tools and things that you can master and bring in don't matter, because you really understood and brought your innovation to the fundamental thing, the base of the rule of first principles. And that's where the magic happens. And so sometimes overcomplicating things and overstacking all these different ideas can sometimes ruin the thing that is the true art of what you're doing.
I think this goes back to your donut operators, the ones you were talking about a second ago, Isaac, was the fact that, like, when somebody's really good at it, it looks easy. It looks simple. It looks like it shouldn't take a lot of work, but that's years of dedicated effort and development. And like when you watch really high level guys do CQB, it looks seamless and it looks simple, and they just step into the room and they just flow through these things, and it's great. But no, that's not, they didn't learn that yesterday. It reminds me of Shaun. You and I were talking about the CQB episode we did years ago, and just that. I mean, you've said this on a number of shows where you were at a point with firearms that it was just, you would think about putting holes in places, and holes would appear in those places, and that's just the way it was. You developed that skill to such a degree that the basics were mastered to such a degree that you didn't have to think about the basics anymore. You just slotted them off to the side, and I love this.
I know we're running tight on time, so I'm just going to throw this one last little idea out there for all of us to chew on to some degree. You know, what's great about CQB is if you do get really good at it, you kind of just enter in and the holes appear as they should. But because of what CQB represents, you actually don't get to be overly creative, as it were. I mean, the tolerances are very tight. The movement patterns are quite precise. You can't like blow a door and then do like a Neo moment where you're like all slow motion doing a somersault or whatever the case is as you're shooting. There's just none of that. I mean, the standards at the highest standards are quite precise, and it doesn't allow for a clown show. But photography, even as like the best professional in the world, it allows for a bit of a clown show, in the sense of the consequences of you playing with a photo aren't the same. And I know, like, if you're a world famous photographer who is on a very important photo shoot and there's a lot of money involved, a lot of prestige, a lot of reputation, perhaps in the balance, like, obviously the photographer is going to act accordingly in the moment. What they're not going to do is turn it into a clown show. And by clown show, I mean like start experimenting in the moment as they're taking that super important photo. But when they get home, it's in CQB, you can't take the bullet back. But at home with your photography, with the photos that you've just taken, you can take the bullet back, because within photography, you can manipulate the images. You can make the bullets turn circles in your photography game if you want. And so, everything can have innovation involved in it. But I do believe that the innovation pipeline can have radically different looks, of course, but it can have radically different outcomes. And to compare CQB to photography now, as I am comparing them, parallels can be made, but then parallels are absolutely broken between those two things to some degree.
Yeah. Aspects of them can be the same, but they are not the same thing in any way. I like that. Now, we are a little bit over 2 hours right now, and I just want to say thank you guys. This has been awesome. So, Pat, Isaac, Shaun, this has been fantastic. Great conversation, and I think I have some novel thought rolling around in my brain. So let's get some final thoughts just on everything we've covered, which is quite a bit. Anything still bubbling in the back of your brain, Isaac? What do you got?
I'm just honored to be on the call with intellectual minds, having deep conversations. I was telling Chance I've been craving deep intellectual and thoughtful conversation, and it seems like that's something that's harder to have in society. And so you have to kind of find that crew. And so I guess with that, like, find the crew that you can really bounce novel ideas off of, and be okay with having your thoughts challenged. Be okay with, exploring expansions off of that thought, because when you're around other systematic thinkers, other novel thinkers, as Shaun's put, like, man, the stuff that can come from that is pretty amazing. And I think this is like the best place for me personally, selfishly, to have those conversations. So I'm always honored to be on here.
Selfishly, it's the best place for me to have these conversations too. So I feel you 100%. Pat, you got any final thoughts?
I do, and I guess it kind of came up at the last second here as I was thinking about this whole thing, because we've had such an amazing conversation about it. One of the biggest things I think that drives innovation and drives innovative people are problems and puzzles. We seek them and we love them and we want to improve them. And I go back to, again, my machinist friend that did that breaching package. He taught himself. He's self-taught everything. Self-taught chemist, self-taught. Like, he used to work with a lot of explosives. He's done a lot of things that I'm sure Shaun knows. The brand Hydrocut. He used to work for them and innovate their stuff. And he got into gunsmithing. He did all these basic things, and he knew machining so well, and he picked it apart with his own brain, figuring out the puzzle without going to school for it. That he's an amazing machinist. No CNC whatsoever. Manual machining. Well, there was a time when there was no work in the gun industry. He ended up working for a race team that had an RX-7 endurance car. They were doing endurance races, and it had a bad cooling problem. He completely redid, with his knowledge and his innovative puzzle, extraction, a super novel way to cool the brakes and the car, in which they were champions of that race. And I think any innovation takes problem solvers. We can put ourselves into many different arenas, but if you have that thirst to pull a puzzle apart, you can be innovative.
Bam. I like it. Shaun, any final thoughts?
Yeah, and why be an innovator? I mean, what's even the point? Well, first of all, if you truly are an innovator, welcome to satisfaction. Because there's nothing that satisfies me more than pulling a problem apart and then putting it back together. I love it. And so if that's not enough for you, well, congratulations. You get to do it for a whole pile of people that you'll probably never ever meet. You may even die before they get to benefit from your innovation. And so, like, do it for yourself, because it's rad as hell. But then do it for others that you're serving in a way that you may never understand. Innovation is literally, I believe, what the human race is all about. If not, we would still be cavemen. And so what has got us to this point? It's this compulsion. It is this deep-seated or deep-rooted need, not desire, but need to make things better around us. And so, again, I believe every single human has that in them. Perhaps the distinction is that not every single human accepts that responsibility.
Not only do you need to accept the responsibility, but you have to. I say there are people out there that have probably accepted that, yeah, I probably need to innovate, but still won't. Right? Like there are people out there that have great ideas for things that won't ever put them into play. And so I don't think it's just about the acceptance of it. It's the willingness to learn, build, and grow. And I think that's the key in it all. And I can't thank you guys enough for another great show. We'll see y'all next week. Chimo.
Chimo.
Thanks everybody for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see y'all next time.